Good morning. It's Friday, which means it's my day off. But I'm more than happy to carry on recording a video on a Friday. And actually, I wanted this morning to talk about what my Friday means, having a day off. Being a Methodist minister is a wonderful thing, but it's also an odd thing in a number of ways. And one of those is that I'm essentially not employed by the church. I have no contract of employment. I have a letter of understanding which talks a bit about the responsibilities I'll fulfill, and it's something that's mutually agreed at the beginning of a 5-year sort of term, or less time, depending on how we've gone about negotiating staying or leaving somewhere. And even that is a bit of a movable feast year on year as situations change in the wider church. I'm essentially not deemed employed by Her Majesty's government. I'm deemed self-employed for tax purposes, so I have to fill in special Ministers of Religion pages for tax purposes, but I don't have a contract or anything like that. Which means I don't have fixed hours, which means that sometimes the boundaries are hard to patrol, and that can go in two directions. I can either struggle to put things down, or I guess wrestle with whether I'm doing enough, which isn't always the same thing. Some of that is about learning to stop, and some of it is about asking what a good day's work entails, or a good, in our language, our well-being advice in the Methodist Church to ministers is that we should work no more than 12 sessions in a week. So that's a morning, an afternoon, or an evening. But then sessions are very different. I can spend 3-4 hours doing administration at home and not be tired at the end of that. But I can conduct a tough funeral that lasts a total of an hour and a half to 2 hours of my day, and essentially write off some of the rest of the day because of the emotional catching up that I need to do as part of having been in that moment. So it's a tricky one to call. I also am expected to take a day off a week, and for me that's Friday. And I have colleagues who I admire and respect who think that's my day off, I have one day and the rest of the week I work, and who certainly do more than the 37 and a half or 40 hours or 12 sessions that is required of people in regular employment as full-time or within our guidelines. It is a vocation, so it's not about payment for services rendered on an approved list. It's about being in a community's life and being set aside, I suppose, in some ways to guide and to reflect on and to give input to a church and wider community's life in ways that are hopefully helpful and that help us all to know ourselves better and to embrace relationship with God or wrestle with the ideas of God honestly and openly. It's a great piece of work to be doing, and I'm grateful for it. But today's my day off, so how do I use that? What do I think about that? What does it mean to me? It's a funny thing, because when I do have, as I have now for the last 2 weeks and will for some time, essentially have Sunday off in terms of not leading worship, not preaching or being in a big crowd of people, Sunday does somehow feel different. I don't know why, but it feels different not working on a Sunday than not working on a Friday. And I just scratch my head about that, and when it happens, I embrace that. But I wanted to reflect perhaps on Sabbath, because the idea of stopping in the way that within the Christian faith, the Jewish faith, certainly the tradition, the practice, the wisdom of stopping for a day, whatever that means, is a really important one. So we have the two accounts in Genesis of creation. They're both essentially mythological. Well, I think so, at least, and I'm certainly not alone in thinking that. They are not historical accounts of a 7-day week in which God, did this and then that and then animals and then, or in Genesis 2, the kind of more relational and mystical account of God creating human beings in God's image and the universe as part of the container for that. The Genesis 1 account is the sort of day 1, day 2, day 3, finishing on day 7. The pinnacle of that is day 7, and that day 7 is, and on the 7th day God rested. And fundamentally that passage shapes our experience or understanding of Sabbath. And there are, the Jewish Sabbath begins in our calendar of Friday at sunset and ends on Saturday at sunset. For those of us in the Christian church, it's traditionally Sunday, morning till evening and beyond. Seventh-day Adventists hold a Jewish Sabbath, so their Sabbath is on a Saturday. I'm not sure that God is particularly bothered about which day it is, but the principle is important. And it's been said by scholars that Genesis 2 is the older account, the account of God having a kind of internal conversation about creating human beings in the universe and then doing so is the older account, and that the Genesis 1 account, which does very particularly do the day 1 through 7, that account is a retelling of the story by the nation of Israel, essentially reminding itself in exile in Babylon centuries later, centuries and centuries later, that they have something that is their unique identity. There is that tells them who they are and how they are in relationship with God, in the midst of being assimilated into a culture where they are slaves and their identity is slipping away. So they do what we all do. They retell the story and they emphasize or tell it in such a way that it picks out a bit that is really important for them. And for them, day 7, 7th day, is the biggie. And so we still do that. Now, Sundays, some people say Sunday's under threat. The idea of Sabbath, this for a long time now. We've had Sunday shopping, Sunday movies, Sunday everything, Sunday morning football for lots of kids and others, and parents wrestling with how to balance those things if they do want to attend church. And as a church, we are going to have to be nimble and imaginative about church that's not on Sunday as part of our regular life. Not as some kind of second prize, but as part of actually honoring Sabbath. Because Sundays are busy for many of us, and not just ministers, but for many people who volunteer or, take up roles that help the church to happen on a Sunday. It's busy, and it intrudes in ways that are chosen, but that still are intrusions into what Sabbath might otherwise be. William Sangster, who I hope was a more cheerful soul than this book portrays him as, a Methodist scholar and a Methodist preacher, a very well-known and famous man, wrote this book, Methodism Can Be Born Again. In 1938 it was published, so just before the Second World War. And it's a concerted moan about the state of the church. And some of it has bearing. But he says this about reasons for the decline in attendance in Methodist churches. Number 3, I won't do all of them. Counter attractions on Sunday explain, in the judgment of some, the church has lost influence. In Victorian times there was not much to compete with the place of prayer on Sunday, in the thought of people who were not content to sit at home. Custom and a sense of propriety led people to worship, who scorn it today as a useless convention. Other occupations fill their hours. In winter, in many cities, the cinema is enticingly open on a Sunday evening. In spring and summer, hiking and cycling prove seductive to thousands of young people. Even the motor car must bear its part in this blame. Many people buy a car and then conclude, often against the evidence, that Sunday is their only chance of really enjoying it. And when the minister, missing them from church, utters some gentle rebuke, I always laugh at that sentence, because I imagine sort of bumping into people in Sainsbury's on a Monday morning and saying, why weren't you at church yesterday? Would not go down well, I'm sure. They say that they can worship God better up on the downs, that they can than they can in the dim religious light of church. Experience goes to prove that people who worship God up on the downs soon get down on their uppers, spiritually speaking. But, except for an occasional visit, the place of prayer may see them no more. And then number 4. I'll just read the first sentence. How much the wireless radio has affected church attendance is not easy to say. Well, there's the beginning of technology intruding into our lives in ways that are wonderful, because we can do this. but that definitely are part of our distractedness and other things. So Sabbath, what's it for? Well, yeah, how long is a piece of string, and who are you asking? Because there are people who are incredibly serious, and I want to say this respectfully, earnest about their adherence to what they see as Sabbath. That Sabbath is a day of rest and prayer devoted to God, and that's fine. That's fine. It shouldn't be that any more than any other day of the week is, but if that takes particular forms, that's okay. But I want to offer some other thoughts about Sabbath that don't even require you to be religious. Sabbath as disruption. Sabbath as something that breaks into our just usual patterns and stops us a little in our relentless moving onwards. Not for all of us, because some of us have very quiet lives for all kinds of reasons, physically and otherwise. But Sabbath as disruption. Sabbath as rest. Sabbath as opportunity to put your feet up. Sabbath as not busy. Sabbath as return to basics, a return to relationship, to family, to... I've never really lived in a family, been part of a family that had the experience of Sunday lunch, the Sunday roast. But the idea of it entices me, because I love the idea of the unhurried ritual meal on a particular day that gathers us, where we can at leisure savor food and talk to each other. I know it's not always like that. It doesn't have to be Sunday lunch, but just the idea of that rest and return to basics and relationship and time for ourselves and each other. Sabbath as choice. Sabbath as something to give to yourself. And then Sabbath as gift. Gift from God. Not requirement, not rule, not law, not some kind of divine ego trip of spending 6 days sort of patiently dealing with us and waiting for the seventh day when we're all going to do for God what many of us did last night, clapping and cheering outside our doors for NHS workers. That Sunday is the great big, give God a clap day, and say thank you and aren't you wonderful, and we're still miserable and please try and be with us until next Sunday. I caricature, of course, the church's life and the pattern of a week, but for some that is their sense of Sabbath. Sabbath as gift. Sabbath as gift. God giving to you and I the pattern of disrupting, rest, returning to basics, choice. I don't know what Sabbath means for you. I guess we're all in some ways we're in the midst of, in the very beginnings of what might be a 3-month Sabbath. Who knows? Maybe longer. And it's it's welcome for a day, but 12 days on, maybe getting a little tired. What does Sabbath mean for you? What does it mean for you to think about a day off, about putting things down, about disrupting the busyness that might be part of your life, disrupting the routines that you impose on yourself that can become tyranny if you're not careful with them? What does it mean to you to have a day, to have a time, to have a block of your life on a regular basis that is other than the rest of it? That's the gift, just to be able to do that. And we're lucky to live in a country and in a time of incredible affluence where it is possible for us to not work 7 days a week and still more than survive. And so we should be grateful for that. I'm going to play with my boys. I'm going to do some tidying on the model railway table behind me, start building a big viaduct, or just thinking about it, which is the beginning stages of building it. I'm going to make some pizzas later, because that's what we do often on a Friday. We're going to watch Toy Story 3, having got through the first 2 last week, and who knows what the rest of the day will bring. But whatever yours is going to be today, and whenever your Sabbath happens, and however you choose it, and whatever you do with it, may it be a gift to you, and may it also be a gift to those who share your life. It's good to stop whatever's going on around us, even in this time when there's not a lot to do, and do something else that is gift for us and for others. So I'm off into my day off. have a good Friday. I'll be back again tomorrow, and God bless you.